Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we're doing another installment of the weekly meta breakdown where we look at the top performing decks on the MTG Arena ladder. This particular video will be for the Explore Best of 1 format. If you're looking for Best of 3, Historic, Standard, we've done some Alchemy in the last little bit. Just check out the playlist. The most recent video, we try to get to each format weekly, provided there's enough data and there's enough to kind of really warrant a dedicated video for it. So as I mentioned, we're doing best of 1 for this video. We're looking at the duration of January 15th through the 22nd, Platinum to Mythic Rank. We have 43,000 games played. And before we jump into the stats, just want to put out a reminder. Next weekend, the 29th, so Sunday, we'll be conducting the Pizza Box Open for the Explorer format. This is a free-to-play tournament, $250,000 in prizes, hosted by Hollywood Pizza. It's free to enter through MTG Melee. You'll be playing online through Arena. And I am commentating the top 8 as well as the last round of the Swiss. So there'll be coverage. I'll have the top 8 coverage in terms of video up on my channel on Monday. So there's some good action there you can cover as well. This is a 1 p.m. Eastern start, but it's really fun, free to enter, so definitely check it out. I'll put the link in the video description. Folks have been asking that I give a little bit more forewarning when these things come up. So consider this your notice if you're interested in playing. They're actually at cap right now, so it'd be waiting list. So you put it in. We usually get close to the full amount anyway, so it is a very popular tournament series. And like I said, it's free to enter, $250 in cash prizes if you do well. But we'll do a meta breakdown. I'll do some best of 3 decks that you could consider as well if you're interested in playing in the tournament. So back to best of 1. The top performing deck of the week is Selesnia Angels. 65% win rate after 180 games. So with this deck here, we basically got addition of Kyla's Reconstruction most recently. This allows us to have 8 collected company style effects that lets us dig into our deck, pull out angels, gain a bunch of life, make a bunch of tokens. And then what you basically want to hit ideally is some combination of Bishop of Wings, Righteous Valkyrie, Resplendent Angel. That's kind of the core engine of the deck. It allows you to spam out multiple angels, gain a whole bunch of life, like Anthem style effects. If you have a Giada out, it also makes each subsequent angel come in with more counters on it. So nice little addition in that there. Youthful Valkyrie gets bigger, Skyclave Apparition as your kind of removal, and then Inspiring Overseer is just a kind of card draw filler that also is an angel. So it just does a little bit of everything, but nothing superb unless you're in like limited. This card's beast in limited. And then just a Skyclave Cleric. This is just a cleric that happens to gain life. It'll trigger with the Righteous Valkyrie, gain you some more life. So if you have a Righteous Valkyrie out and you cast this, you basically gain 5 life for 2 mana, and you get a body behind. This deck also has access to 1 Nykthos in the mana base. While you're not a dedicated devotion deck, you have a lot of white pips, so it's a nice way to like pump in a whole bunch of mana, whether it be to like a Resplendent Angel or to like Kyla's to put up to 7 creatures, for example, into play at a single time. We then go to Mono Blue Spirits. This deck's at a 62% win rate after 110 games. And then this deck is largely been unchanged. Usually the only flex spots in this deck, you'll see sometimes Slip Out the Back, sometimes Fading Hope, or sometimes like the other Curious Obsession style effect. It really is dependent on what the meta is kind of bringing in. This deck's very good against like the mono green decks. It does struggle a little against low to the ground aggro, especially those that go wide, as well as Rakdos midrange, because they often have just a ton of removal. So it's really kind of play draw dependent in that matchup. But the core of the deck, what you're trying to do is get out a body and then throw on a Curious Obsession, draw a bunch of cards, and then just tempo your opponent. For those of you who are unfamiliar with tempo, it's basically trying to spend like less mana than what your opponent's doing to kind of counteract what they're doing. So as an example, Geist Light Snare or Lofty Denial are 1 or 2 mana counter spells, which if your opponent's trying to play 4 or 5 mana spells, kind of gets them around that way there. Oh, got a live sub, so appreciate the sub. Everyone, if you can, greatly appreciate it if you can sub to this channel. We're trying to hit 10,000 by June. But in any case, so then you have ways to like pump mana. You can play at instant speed with this deck. A Spended Spirit gets bigger. The Rattle Chains can be used as protection. Also lets you flash in things. Can also get tricky with like, okay, so you have a Rattle Chains out, you can flash in Supreme Phantom that messes up maybe combat or blocking math. You have Shackle Geist that can flash in and then tap down your opponent's stuff. Cool kind of line is with this Faceless Haven, you can attack in with Faceless Haven because it has Vigilance, and then tap it to the Shackle Geist, so it's kind of offense, and you're able to control in that regard as well. This deck is hard to play well, so there's going to be games that, like, so I would say don't get discouraged if you're learning this deck. There's going to be games you just go like 1-drop, Curious Obsession, counterspell, 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 win. There's going to be other games where just navigating, like, because your cards cost so little and you're really dependent on a creature being on the board, like sequencing, timing, stuff like that. So it is a deck that requires a little bit more practice. Tempo decks usually are going to have a bigger disparity in terms of win rates between very good and maybe like newer players or learning players. So don't get discouraged if you're picking up this deck. It does take a bit of practice. We then go to Mono White Humans. This one's at 59% win rate, just a shy under, 58.9, we'll round up. And this is a more aggressive creature-based focus deck built around human synergies. Something someone pointed out to me last week when we were covering this deck, I should really read cards better. But Recruitment Officer gets any card 3 CMC or less. That's a creature, not just soldiers. In my mind, I was thinking Soldier Tribal and kind of went from there. But you have card advantage there. Hopeful Initiate gets bigger. There's a lot of ways to put counters on your cards in this deck, which is really good at blowing up artifacts and enchantments. Dauntless Bodyguards used for protection of creatures. Luminarch puts counters, gets things big. Thalia for tax. Thalia's Lieutenant is a really, really nice card in this deck. It puts counters on your team, or all your humans, but then subsequent humans make it bigger. So it's kind of a unique Lord style effect that itself grows and puts on power. Then again, nice interaction with the Hopeful Initiate to be able to synergize with those counters. Also, the Adeline in the deck makes more humans, which then trigger the Thalia's Lieutenant. So it's not unusual that this is a 2-mana 5/5 or larger in the deck. You have Removal and Brutal Cathar as well as Skyclave Apparition. And then Extraction Specialist does a nice job of just returning back either like Thalia's Lieutenants that died or Luminarchs or protection in the Dauntless Bodyguards. And this deck goes well. You have Brave the Elements, which I know normally these protection spells, like protection from color of choice, like a God's Willing style effect, is singular for one creature. This one here, Brave the Elements, is for all your white creatures. So it's a great way to just be unblockable for a turn for all your spells, which is very powerful. The deck also has a number of lands to just minimize the risk of flooding. So you have Mutavaults, which are creature lands that happen to be humans. You can activate your Mutavault with Thalia Lieutenant on the stack to put counters on it. Chefnet's Dunes is a Anthem effect for your team. Castle Ardenvale obviously makes tokens, and Ijanjo as removal. Then we go to Boros Heroic, 57% win rate. This is another deck similar to Spirits that's a little tricky to play. So again, there's going to be games where you're going to go like 1-drop, like Arcanist or Virtuoso or something, and just kind of play your spells, just kill your opponent. The games that are tough are when you draw too many, like first off, just mulliganing with this deck is difficult. Do you keep a 1-creature hand in the dark? How many creatures, how many spells? If you don't have creatures, a lot of your spells don't do anything. Knowing when to sequence, when to go all in, when to kind of hold back and kind of go from that regard. But the core of the deck is you want to target your creatures with pump spells. And then you get added bonuses. So like Trample and Power Boost, and these just draw cards to replace themselves. Protection and God's Willing, Removal and Reckless Rage. Homestead puts counters, and then Invigorating Rampage is kind of your payoff card there. So it is a tricky deck. I usually play at like a 50% win rate with this deck, and it always frustrates me. This is very much like Auras. So if you like Auras in Historic, this deck kind of plays similar in that, just instead of throwing on a bunch of enchantments, you're kind of using pump spells. But it's kind of got similar vibes in the sense that you have 1 to 2 creatures out, you're going to beef up those creatures, and you're going to try to do it without your opponent removing them, type thing. And then we have Mono Red Aggro. So this is a creature-focused version, not a burn-focused. 56% win rate. In the core of this deck, this one here is like a turbo cleave deck, I usually call it. So you have Annex in here, Torbrand, and 4 of Ember Cleaves. The goal of the deck is to kind of spam the board early with a lot of creatures. You can do that in part with like Burning Tree Emissary to give you a lot of bodies. And then what you're trying to do is get out Ember Cleave as quick as possible. You have stuff like Annex, which scales, gets up really big, and lets you kind of hit for like 14 plus at times. Because like an Annex on its own plus the Cleave is 10 damage. So you get 2 pips plus the 1/1 bonus, so 10 damage on its own. Add in any other creatures, and it starts scaling quite large in that regard. Foundry Denizen is just another early drop. The Fanatical Firebrand can be used as removal early. This deck, so between the 2 mono red decks, this and the burn deck, this version of the mono red deck has a much better Angels matchup. It's still favored in Angels' way just because they can gain a lot of life. But because the Angels don't typically interact that well, they have 4 Skyclave apparitions, that's it. You can use like the Ember Cleave draws to kind of get them. Now, if you are running into a lot of Angels, the easier kind of switch is to go into Ferocidons. And I actually probably would go down a Torbrand, maybe down an Annex, and then go to the Ferocidons. So Chain Whirler is very good against the Humans deck. It's good against the Spirits deck. It can be decent against Heroic at times. The First Strike's relevant at times. It's also good against mono green Elves, or both the Elves and the Devotionless. Ferocidon stops the life gain, so you have flexibility in your 3-drop slot in terms of what you want to attack the meta with. I usually don't like 3 Torbrands. It's kind of a card that requires you to already have an existing board state. It's a 4-mana do nothing if you don't have that board state. And on its own, it's not that great. It does allow you to kind of push through crazy damage. But often at times, if you're at that point where you can push through crazy damage, you probably are already ahead on board. So I would probably go 2 and then maybe find Splot for Ferocidon. Like I said, if you're playing the Angels deck. If not, I'd probably trim a Ferocidon and play a second Chain Whirler. Also helps with just kind of the devotion element, or like your mana element. I played a lot of mono red, so I've kind of played a bunch of different variations between burn and that. We then go to mono green devotion. So this is an interesting configuration for the best of 1 format, 56% win rate. So you still have your elements of like your Druid package, your Wolf Willow. This version's on a Paradise Druid and a Voracious Hydra main. And then it's going with 2 Courser of Crewfix to let you play lands off the top of your library, as well as gain some life. Now, notably with this, these 4 slots are typically reserved for Lovestruck Beast. Lovestruck Beast lets you draw off Kiora. It's kind of 2 spells. It also, with the Heart's Desire ability to make a 1/1, gives you a white creature, which notably can block against a Brave the Elements, since they would give you pro-green. The Courser does let you hit some land drops. These decks typically skimp a little on lines, so playing off the top could be reasonable. Voracious Hydra is a little bit of interaction, kind of mixed into there. The one thing, so I played this in the Decathlon in the best of 3 version, but I think some configuration changes. So Nisa's largely win more, I find, in this deck. You're usually going to win off your current sideboard package anyways. So I would probably cut the Nisa, play a Sky Sovereign main. That was really like impactful, just hitting it off of the Cavalier Thorn, stuff like that. I personally like 23 lands. I found at times like the Elves usually get killed, so then you're kind of stuck, especially just like if you're running into Rakdos, which Rakdos is a weird thing. Like it doesn't have a really high win rate, but it is represented a good amount. So if you get your Elves killed, then it kind of hurts your devotion and your mana type thing. And then Nisa also exposes your lands to more removal. So I like the Sky Sovereign main. I would probably play another land, but I'm usually a little bit more inclined to play more lands in decks. This sideboard looks pretty solid, all things considered. What I would do is I would switch the Pithing Needle to Karn's Silex. So the Angels matchup's really bad for mono green, I find, just because you don't really interact with their board that well. So you could get ahead and like Portal to Phyrexia and kind of control them that way there. But it's very easy for them to go wide. They can sack stuff and get spirits. So there's ways around that they can get it. You're also not pressuring their life total in a crazy manner, so they can turn on the effects of like Resplendent Angel pretty well. Karn Silex, 3 mana, especially with Kiora. you get a good draw, it's just a sweeper for their board, so you could control them that way there. The Pithing Needle is largely used for things like Thespian Stage in the Lotus Field combo. You can name stuff like Teferi, stuff of that nature, but there's not really too much like blue-white control going around. And like if we look at these decks, like what are we Pithing Needle? So you can Pithing Needle Resplendent Angels all activated ability, not that great. Mono Blue Spirits, you could Pithing Needle Ascendant Spirit or Spectral Sailor. Again, that's not the angle you want to attack those matchups. Mono White, you're not really like Extraction Specialist. Again, not really what you want. Nothing in the Heroic deck. Nothing in the Mono Red deck. You could do it in the mirror, but then you're usually hurting yourself as well. So I like the Karn Silex in these package, but at least they're updating their sideboard. So this is like Graveyard Hate for the Grease Fang combo. You could also like take out Parhelion or certain decks. You can kind of just Stone Brain, steal their stuff, and then with the Karn, you can get it back from exile, and then you can also steal their stuff. Like you could just keep trimming out all the win cons. So it's good against like blue-white control because you can go and like name Teferi, then you could go name Wandering Emperor, and then you can name Hall the Storm Giants. You can name Castle Ardenvale. So there's ways you can kind of pick apart their deck to strip them out of win conditions. Sky Sovereign's really good at just controlling creature decks. The God's Pharaoh is a good tax effect, especially if you can limit them on lions. Cityscapes, General Blow Up, and Portal's kind of the fun. I love winning with Portal. I love that card so much. We then go to Golgari Elves. So this is a mono green deck that's just splashing black for the Shaman of the Packs. So Shaman of the Pack lets you deal or makes your opponent lose life, notably not damage, for the number of elves you have. So this is kind of a go-wide strategy. So what you're trying to do is play as many elves as possible. You have stuff like Elvish Warmaster, Dwindlin's Elite that makes multiple bodies. You have Lord Effects, an Elvish Clan Caller, Leaf Crown Druid. The Realm Maka lets you play off the top, a bunch of Ramp, and then Coco kind of mixed in. You have Nykthos as well, which is nice because if you get a wide board, you can pump all that mana into the Elvish Warmaster, kind of overrun your opponent that way there. And sorry, this deck was at 56% win rate. Actually 400 games, so this deck's been kind of popular. This is a deck where like the burn version of Mono Red's actually better than the Mono Red creature deck because you need to pick off the specific lords. Like Chain Whirler in theory is good against elves, but because they have a lot of lord effects, you usually can't hit them times. So I always found, like especially in Historic, where elves is a lot more potent of a deck, that the burn version, being able to pick off key creatures, is a lot more impactful. And then lastly, we have Abzan Greasefang, 55% win rate. This is a deck that always hovers around like the 55 to 60% range. It's a deck that has probably the most amount of feel bads. Like I feel like my opponent always turn 3 Greasefangs me, and then when I pick up the deck, it's just I mill everything but the combo pieces. But the core of the deck is you want to get any of these vehicles into the graveyard, cast a Greasefang, reanimate, and attack your opponent. The core card you want to hit is the Parhelion, which with Greasefang lets you hit for 13 and leaves 2 angels behind. There's a number of ways to put cards into the graveyard between Stitcher Supplier, Grizzly Salvage, Rafine's Informant, Satyr Wayfinder, and Liliana the Veil. You can reanimate your stuff with Greasefang as well, kind of mixed into that. So that's it for the week. Let me know what you've been playing in Explore. And like I said, if you're interested, sign up to Pizza Box Open. I will be doing coverage. If you just want to tune in, there'll be coverage all day Sunday on Hollywood Pizza's Twitch stream. And then I'll cover the top 8 on my YouTube channel as well. So you can hear me talk about Historic in great detail, commentating on some great gameplay. And then you can just check out, see what's new. Like there's going to be a lot of best of 3 content close to, we get the full show up, 128 deck lists registered. So a good sample size for us to look at some meta breakdown as well. In any case, thanks for watching everyone. Hope you have a great one and stay safe out there.